morning to everybody and welcome to the Kincardine and Mearns Area Committee, today 30th of June 2026. I'll start with our usual housekeeping. So please note that the public section of the meeting will be recorded and available to view online after the meeting has finished. And can I ask members to activate their cameras where possible, and can all attendees mute their microphones when not speaking? And please do not come in during items unless I invite you to do so. And if members wish to speak on any point, as always, please use the hands up function. I will obviously schedule some comfort breaks throughout the meeting as well. And before we begin, I just want to highlight a local achievement that's been brought to my attention. So I'd like to acknowledge and congratulate the brothers John and Henry Suter. Both are originally of Luggermuir, and both have been participating in the Football World Cup in the United States. One has been playing for the Scotland squad, and the other has been part of the Australian squad, the Socceroos. And both men originally attended Luggermuir Primary and went on to Mearns Academy. So my congratulations to both of them on their achievement on behalf of the committee. And I would just say at this point, if anybody would like to bring to my attention successes and achievements of that week, I'd be very happy to share them as appropriate at the start of the meeting. So we'll move on now to the agenda, and I'll ask Kirsty, please, committee officer, to take us over. Thank you.
Chair. Thanks for having me.
Present.
Thanks for Aitchison. I'm giving it acknowledgements. Thanks for Black.
Present.
Thanks for Barnett.
Present.
Thanks for Carney. Thanks for Clark.
Good morning.
Thanks for Dickinson.
Present.
Thanks for Edison.
Present.
Thanks for Smith. Present. Thanks for Sullivan.
Here.
Thanks for Turner.
Present.
And thanks for Victor.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kirsty. So we'll move on now to declaration of members' interests. Could I ask members, please, if you have a conflict or a transparency statement to make, please raise their hand. So Councillor Alison.
Thank you. First of all, I have a transparency statement in relation to item 6, the area committee plan, due to the reference to NHS Grampion's information governance, as I am chair of the board of NHS Grampion. However, I have applied the objective test and will stay and take part in that item. I've also got a declaration of interest in relation to item 9 due to a family connection, and I will leave the meeting for that item. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison. And now Councillor Tracy.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to make a declaration of a conflict of interest with regards to item 4. I have publicly opposed similar infrastructure projects throughout the Mearns, and having applied the objective test, I will leave the room and not take part in the discussion about decision making.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smith. Okay, I see no further hands, so we'll move on now to the resolution on equalities. So can I ask the committee whether, in line with the council's legal duty under section 149 of the Equality Act 2010, we are agreed that in making decisions, we shall have due regard to the need to eliminate discrimination, harassment and victimisation, that we will advance equality of opportunity between those who share a protected characteristic and persons who do not share it, and that we will foster good relations between those who share a protected characteristic and persons who do not share it. And that where an integrated impact assessment has been provided, we will consider its contents and take these into account when reaching a decision. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. We also have example items on our agenda this morning. These are items 9 and 10, which we propose to take in private. Can I ask if this is agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. So moving on now to item 3, which is the minute of the meeting of the Kincardine and Mearns Area Committee of the 9th June 26. Can I ask the committee whether they agree that this is a correct minute and record of that meeting? We are looking at it for accuracy. I'm seeing no hands, so it is agreed that that is a correct minute. So moving on to item 4, this is full planning permission. I'll give you a moment, Tracy, to leave. So this is full planning permission for the installation of battery energy storage system, a BESS, with an installed capacity of 49.9 megawatts and associated infrastructure at land to northeast of Old Schoolhouse Barras, Stonehaven. And the formation of access at land to northeast of Old Schoolhouse Barras, Stonehaven, and that's a separate application. So we have 2 applications before us this morning for consideration. We have requests to speak. They're from Mr. David Hannon, who is the applicant from GS Capital, request to speak from Andrew Manson and from David Ewan, who are both objectors. Can I ask councillors if they're willing to hear from these parties?
Yes.
Agreed. Thank you very much. So just to explain to those in the room, the way this is going to work is in a moment I'm going to invite Ms. Todd to introduce the report for us, the planning officer presenting this to us today. He's accompanied by Owen Sharon, who is also a member of the planning service, who has been very involved in the writing of this application, of the report. After we've heard from Louise, we will have the opportunity to put questions to her. When we've completed doing that, we will take you as speakers in turn. You will have 5 minutes to speak. And then after that, we will have the opportunity to ask you as many questions as we might have. Okay, and then you're welcome to stay in the meeting when you return to your seat, but you will be allowed to contribute further to our discussions. So on that basis, and with that understood, let me turn to Planning Officer Louise Todd to present the application. Thank you for being here, Louise.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. This report concerns 2 linked planning applications for the battery energy storage system and a new access point on land to the north east of the Old Schoolhouse Barras. The applications are before you today because the best proposal constitutes a major development under the Town and Country Planning Hierarchical Development Regulations 2009 due to its 49.9 megawatt capacity. While the associated access application is technically a local development, it's being reported to committee to ensure a comprehensive overview of the infrastructure impacts. We've received 122 representations for the BESS application, comprising 1 support and 121 objections. Key concerns raised include loss of prime agricultural land, cumulative visual impact, road safety, noise and fire risk. The 4 objections regarding the access road focus on the capacity of the local road network to handle heavy construction traffic. And regarding consultations, all relevant technical services, including environmental health, road development, flood risk, have no objections subject to conditions. And notably, the ISPB has confirmed that the proposed mitigation for wildlife, including barn owls, is acceptable. So the site is located approximately 6.5 kilometres southwest of Stonehaven and lies within the remote rural area of the Aberdeenshire Local Development Plan. The development is situated on agricultural land to the north-east of the Old Schoolhouse and will be accessed from the public road network via an improved access junction. And you can see on the next slide, you see here the part of the development, which is the associated access application. Now, the site itself occupies 1.3 hectares of land, with the BESS compound occupying 0.25 hectares, housing 20 battery units, 10 converter containers, control rooms, 2.4 metre high security fencing, CCTV and substantial planting. And the proposal also includes a sustainable drainage system, pond to manage surface water, and the new access junction serving the site from the public road. This slide is just identified by the landscape mitigation, which the proposal includes. You've got here a 3 metre high landscape bund along the north and western boundary. You can see that in the browny colour. On top of that, there's green hatching. That's the native wheat and shrub planting, and then the kind of orange planting around that is wildflower areas. The next few slides will just be the infrastructure required to accommodate the development. So we've got elevations of the battery containers, transformers, switch room, control buildings, CCTV infrastructure, fencing, and the gates as well. The infrastructure is all generally low profile, with the tallest element being the CCTV poles at approximately 3 metres in height. These are some visualisations which help to illustrate the appearance of the development from a range of viewpoints. This is viewpoint road, viewpoint 1 taken from the minor road to the south of the development, looking northeast. So this is the actual field itself that the site's to be developed, and then the access track would just run up this field margin here. And this is it as existing or at a stage in time relatively recently. You can see here the bund which would be surrounding the development in brown again, and then the landscape planting in time which is proposed. Second viewpoint is from further north up the road, and it's looking across the adjacent field towards the site. And again, you've got the bund there visible in the distance, and then the landscaping on top. This slide here is just the minor road to the north, and the site isn't actually going to be visible from this location, but it just to give the context of the site itself and then the infrastructure within the overall site. And the same again, this is from Bruxy Hill to the west, and you can see the landscape there, and then the infrastructure to accommodate the development shown in red. So this slide relates to the associated access application, and following discussing with roads development, it was identified that part of the access required to serve the best outside the original red line boundary. So a separate application has been submitted to regulise the formation of the access onto the public road. So it's just the area outlined in red. So some photographs here. This is from within the site, looking towards Bruxy Hill to the west. And then looking north towards the existing energy infrastructure that you can see from the site. That's the Clogna Hill wind turbines. And then this is the neighbouring property, old schoolhouse. The access will just run in front of that hedge along the field boundary. And then it's again looking from within the site towards the top where the infrastructure will be located, and the junction with the public road. And then finally, view from the main public road showing the context of the site. It would just be the field along in the distance where the trees are in front of that. So principal development is strongly supported by MPF4 policies 2 and 11 and the local development plan policy C2, which identify BESS as critical infrastructure for grid flexibility and Scotland's net zero transition. And while the site is in a rural area, the landscape and visual appraisal demonstrates that its impacts are highly localised. The proposed screening bund and perimeter planting will effectively integrate the development, and the site benefits from existing natural containment. Regarding technical matters, noise levels are within acceptable limits, drainage infrastructure is sufficient and robust, and there's no increased flood risk. Roads development are satisfied that with a construction traffic management plan, the access point can safely accommodate development. And to address the temporary nature of the facility, we're recommending a 14-year temporary consent with mandatory financial guarantee to ensure full site restoration at the end of its life. But overall, the proposal is fully compliant with the local development plan and national planning framework before. It is considered to represent a vital contribution to national energy strategy while incorporating environmental and community safeguards. And the recommendation is to grant both applications subject to the conditions listed in the report. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, I see Councillor Planning, Laurie.
Good morning. I'm just wondering, can you clarify what you said about it being critical?
Yeah, policy is very, very clear. National Plan the framework forward, and our own local development plan has got a number of policies which emphasise that the renewable infrastructure is critical at the moment in Scotland. It's a national priority. So that's why we consider it critical. We consider it essential infrastructure. The best proposal.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Edison, Alison.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for clarifying that point because obviously that was raised in the letter sent in from the Community Council, so that's relevant. Thank you. First of all, I have a comment and then a couple of questions. The comment is in relation to the length of time there's been between the public engagement and the report coming to us for this determination. It seems right, they were in November 23 and January 24, and for something like this, that does seem quite a long time ago. I know there's nothing you can do about that. That's just a comment on my feeling about that one. In 6.49, there's the comment about the community wealth building strategy, and it says it's to be adopted by the council in 2025. Later in the report, it tells us that that has not yet been adopted. So I think it's really important to bring clarity to the public meeting about the status of that strategy, please. That was the first point. And secondly, in the comment about the use of the access road, it talks in 6.34 about access would be limited after the construction phase and limited to occasional use by small vehicles and would be unlikely to exceed the level of access under current agricultural use. That word unlikely brings a bit of bit that sounds a bit subjective into this, so it'd be great if you could please explain on the basis, what basis that conclusion was reached. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, first on the community wealth building element, we apologise for that error in the report. That community wealth building statement has been adopted so that it is now part of policy. So that should have been updated, but ultimately what that requires is for our place and economy team to review the strategy that's been submitted and then confirm that they are satisfied with it. We take their expertise and their advice on that element and that they are content with that. And as well as that, there will be an additional condition attached seeking the submission of additional procedures, additional detail and timetable for implementation and reporting on an annual basis of the socio-economic scheme. So yes, I do appreciate that point that should have been updated within the recent report. The second point was in regard to access. You might need to come back to me on that point just to make sure I'm covering it. But during the course of the application, it did become aware that there were changes in the red line. Slight junction improvements went out with the red line. So that is what the separate application is required for. You did touch on community engagement. The major application has been gone through all statutory requirements for public consultation. And in addition to that, the applications have both been advertised as statutory requirements meet. So they have gone through all opportunity for members of the public to comment. The additional point was the usage of the access, is that right? Sorry, I'm going to just get.
Yes, thank you. It was a comment of the use of the being unlikely to be an increased use after, and just the basis of that conclusion of
Yes.
that unlikely. Thank you.
Yes, during the construction phase of development, we are very aware that that is the point where the most traffic and the most coming and goings. Once that is constructed, we don't suspect there'll be a particularly high level. There is a construction environment management plan that has been submitted with the application, and that outlines the suspected usage, and I can probably find that out for you. But ultimately, those development are fully satisfied that within the construction environment management plan, the findings are acceptable, and on top of that, an additional one will be conditioned to get further detail when we know exact details. But from the moment, what did they say, during operation, approximately 4 maintenance visits per month are anticipated. So we can liken that to the visits you would have if you were a farmer visiting the field or the adjacent field boundaries. So that's where that wording came from, because the construction environment management plan does give us these details, and then there will be kind of belt and braces approach with an additional condition attached. And then we will need to do roads development and Transport Scotland on that information.
Alison, does that answer your questions?
That's very helpful. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we'll bring in Councillor Black. Dawn.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I had picked up on the community wealth building as well. That was passed by full council on the 26th of June last year. So that absolutely needs to be in there. We need that. And it is actually conditioned. Condition 24, I think, is on the annual reporting required and the delivery methods outlined. It would have been nice to have had that in front of us today to actually be able to use that to make a decision. But my other point was around the actual location of this. Now, it does state in the report that feasibility and actual grid connection aren't planning considerations and are matters for the developer and the network operator. But it seems like from reading the whole report, you know, it's saying that their infrastructure, this developer's infrastructure will stop at the roadside, and connection to any substation or any wind farm bringing energy in would be up in the air, might happen, who knows who's going to do it. So in my mind, we can't really separate those things really, because and I will be asking the developer this, have they got actual connections? Have they got any agreements? Otherwise, we're putting the cart before the horse and we're having a BESS situated in a field, not necessarily close to a wind farm or a substation relatively. And is it going to be connected? So a comment maybe on, you know, how we can take that into consideration. And also thinking about cumulative impact, we've already got 3 BESS approved in the vicinity, but we don't have any mapping of that. Do you have a map to show us in relation to this site where the other ones are? Because I think cumulative impact is going to be of high importance for weighting in our decision making today.
Yes, so firstly on grid connection, that the policy is very clear. Policy 11 specifically states grid capacity should not constrain renewable energy development, and it's for the developer to agree the connection to the grid from the relevant network operator. So it's not a material planning consideration for us that would allow the application or merit the application to be refused, because ultimately if the grid connection isn't possible, the development won't happen. If there's constraints out with the planning control or out with the developer, if it's financial reasons, like for example, the grid connection, it won't progress. So we need to look at this proposal in regard to, is it acceptable in regard to what is in front of us, and the grid connection is an operator between the operator and the grid. So it's not something that we can put a huge amount of weight on, and that is very clear in policy. The cumulative impact, I think, was your second point. Again, this is an aspect where there's no reason in policy to justify refusing the development because there's others within the area. Policy is very clear that all renewable energy developments will be supported. And yes, we need to take into account landscape impact, which if there was a landscape impact that we thought was a result of multiple BESS within the immediate vicinity, that would be an issue. But in this case, we do know that there's a couple. There's one to the north of the A90, which is relatively close. There's one to the west, which is west of Bruxy Hill. These are both separated by existing landform, and there's no intervisibility between them. So we don't consider there to be a landscape impact caused by the development. It's also very, very well contained with trees. It's got the bund proposed. It's got landscape mitigation, which will in time ensure that the development integrates into the area better. There will likely be a localised impact, but again, policy does accept that. When there is renewable development, policy accepts that there may be a localised impact, but ultimately the benefits outweigh that if it is appropriately mitigated through landscaping, which this is considered. Councillor Black.
Yeah, thank you for letting me to come back in. My concern with the where we're standing at the moment, from what we've been told with the connection into the grid, I mean, it's about who's going to put that infrastructure in, and are we then going to have another application come back for putting the infrastructure between
where this site meets the road and to Fidis substation or whichever substation it's, because I think it's been consented for, or as NISO's given it a connection at Fidis. I think there was a case earlier this year where the Court of Session ruled that admittedly it was a wind farm, but it's still energy infrastructure, and its off-site grid connection were legally considered a single project, and we've not got that here. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with that query. And as for the cumulative impact, it's the creeping industrialization of our rural area, and I'm not thinking necessarily about visual impact, because I do admit that, and I can see that, visual mitigation has been taken. It's just that creeping industrialization, the more and more and more of these that we have.
Okay, Councillor Black, so teasing out questions here. I think you're asking about the ratio decision in terms of grid connections and how that's considered in the whole, which is considered at the top of the report. So maybe there's a question that Louise could address around what's actually covered within that, because I think it's the first time we've had ratio decision within one of our reports at committee. The second point you're making was more of a point, I think, unless you have a question sitting there about cumulative impact slash.
Because
want to come back to, but if you could make it a question, please, because that's the point we're at.
Yeah, sure. The cumulative impact question is around taking creeping industrialization into account, not just landscape impact, and the creeping industrialization for the rural community.
Okay, I'll bring Louise in on those points.
Yeah, so the grid connection element in terms of planning permission wouldn't normally be subject to planning application. It's undertaken by the statutory undertaker. So we wouldn't require a planning application unless an element triggered the need for planning permission, engineering work, something like that. But very rarely is that the case. If it did need a planning application, then we would deal with it. It would go through the normal process of public representations. It may well be screened, which I'll get onto, but that would all come under that separate process. But generally speaking, no, that wouldn't come under our remit. In terms of the environmental impact assessment, it was screened originally when it was just the best proposal. Then the ratio decision was made earlier this year, which did change how we screen developments. And it was concluded that the grid connection is an integral part of the project. Now, we're not talking about integral part of the development, we're talking about the screening element. So it was revisited, the planning service went back, re-screened the development, and we're looking at environmental impacts and whether they're significant or not. And it was considered that it still remained to not require an EIA. There was no significant impacts and no EIA required, but it has gone through the screening process twice for the BESS itself and for the grid connection.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll move on now to Councillor Carr. George.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the report. I was just going to ask in relation to National Planning Framework 4. A reporter did claim that in his or her opinion, a battery storage application did not necessarily constitute essential electricity infrastructure. So just wondered if you could comment on that view that was expressed by the reporter. Thank you.
Well, we have to take what's the policy which is in front of us, and the policy is very clear that it's essential infrastructure. And until we're told otherwise in a national policy document that we assess our applications against, that is the stance we will take. So that is the case.
No further questions?
No, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sullivan. Melanie.
Good morning. I'm not entirely sure how to phrase this, and I don't want to come across as aggressive, but from what you've said, it sounds like we have no justification in planning regulations to reject this at all. So why is it before us at area committee? Or have I got that wrong? It seems like the planning service has said that it's completely justified and there we go.
So I'll bring in Louise.
Yeah, it is strongly supported, and we can't get away from that. Renewable energy is one of the main targets for Scotland on National Planning Framework 4, which is our main hierarchy document, is very clear on that. So the principle of development is supported. The other aspects are still very important, whether it has any other issues in terms of landscape, historical, flood and drainage, technical elements, but in this case, they've all been assessed by the relevant officers, consultees, and everyone is content, and then we've made a recommendation on that basis, the principle being acceptable and all technical elements being considered acceptable, so therefore that's the conclusion we've come to with the recommendation of approval.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Agnew, Wendy.
Thank you. It appears to me that you had a green and pleasant land, and now it's going to become a grey and unpleasant land. What I was going to ask, the schoolhouse, how far away is the schoolhouse from this storage?
The nearest property, we can clarify exactly, but I actually, there's a couple of written with exactly the same distance, and I think they're both, is it 300 metres or 200 metres? I can clarify, just to let me say. Yeah.
300 metres.
So 200 metres, I think it's actually, according to the noise impact assessment, it's Fairley, which is 203 metres from the site, and then I'm not quite sure that was within the table of contents, but yeah, that, so approximately 200 metres from the site is the nearest property, approximately.
And do they get any compensation for that?
And not as far as I'm aware, that's not part of our.
You said 5 minutes ago that it was a benefit. Going to give benefit. But I ask benefit to who? Because it doesn't appear it's farmland, it doesn't appear it's landscape, it doesn't appear it's people that like to walk in the country. So who's going to benefit from this?
The benefit is in the renewable element. So this is going to be storing energy to be released to the grid when it's required to meet the benefits of Scotland in regard to renewable energy infrastructure and meeting the targets.
I just wonder, I did read out part in that time that there's not enough wind turbines to service this practice. So I just wonder, do you make sure there's going to be the wind near the turbines, or do you just put one in the landscape and hope the best? That's right. It appears to me that there's not been joined up lighting somewhere.
Sorry, can you clarify the question?
Are you asking about need?
I was told that, well, no, I read that there was so many, like battery storage now, and there were so many, there wasn't enough wind turbines to service them. I don't know if that's right or not. But if that is the case, there's a bit of a problem, isn't there?
Yeah, so that comes back to the need point that
Yeah.
if there's not need demonstrated, then the development ultimately won't be feasible, it won't go ahead. There needs to be the need, I presume, and for the developer, the operator to want to facilitate the development, which is why policy doesn't require you to assess need, because there's often an over provision to meet targets, but we're planning policy is looking at the principle of development, and in this case, if consent doesn't guarantee a project will be built.
Thank you very much. Wendy, if I could ask you, please, Councillor Agnew, to figure out like I'm not. That's yeah, I had my hand up because I wanted to just tease out the difference between essential and need, but I think you've just answered that point. So content with that. I did want to ask, given some of the representations, whether or not there are any impacts on, you know, what your comments are with respect to ancient woodland, prime agricultural land, and, you know, two issues which normally would give us cause to hesitate, notwithstanding our, you know, policy 11.
Yes.
Is overriding this informal.
So prime agricultural land, I'll mention that first, that the part of the access track is on prime agricultural land. And policy 5 of 9.4 and PR1 of our local development plan does have a remit for renewable energy. So in this case, if the land can be reinstated at the end of its operational life, and that's quite common when you see wind turbines are often sited on prime agricultural land, and at the end of their operation, the infrastructure is removed, such as the foundations, etc. That is the same case that we would expect to see here. And ultimately, the Scottish Government has clarified that BESS is classed as essential infrastructure, which is why we can take that stance when it comes to prime agricultural land element.
Ancient woodland.
Ancient woodland. Yes. So the woodland just to beyond the access track is protected, and initially the cabling was to go very close adjacent. So they've moved that over to the other side of the access track to ensure that that would require quite a lot of digging. So that's moved it away to protect the root protection areas, and the construction track itself would be no dig construction technique. That's what we would expect to see, and that's what our environmental planners have reviewed and requested. So we would be quite content that they can be protected. There is a landscaping plan attached to the condition, attached to the consent. And we will get detail within that, and it can always be made more robust if that's considered necessary. We can get more specific detail on that.
Okay then, thank you very much. So can I just check, were there any further questions at this point? So I've got Councillor Burnett, Shirley.
Sorry, I wasn't sure whether to come in with this or not, but I am going to. In 6.6, I just like a bit of clarification and to endorse what Councillor Black said. If we're to approve this without knowing how the electrical connection is going to be made, to me that is the equivalent of having to grant planning permission for a house in the middle of a field, not knowing how it's going to get any services, and it's like a catch-22 situation.
Councillor Burnett, I just. Because obviously we're not yet at the point where we're deliberating the application. Can I just double check that you're leading up to a question?
I am, yes. My question basically is that in 6.6, it says ultimately it is not the role of the planning system. Now that says to me it's not definite. There's something in there. Are we further down the food chain for that? Or is ultimately a misnomer? In fact, it is definite. Thank you.
No, it's not. It's not part of. It's not an element we can take consideration of unless it requires planning permission in its own right. That's when it would become part of the planning services remit. But at the moment, and generally speaking, they don't. It's only in very rare occasions, like I say, that it may require, some significant work that triggers planning permission. But generally, it's undertaken within statutory undertaker's duty. So. No, it's not something that we can take consideration of, but we have considered it under screening. So that is where we would look at it for an environmental impact separate to the planning process.
Included in the ratio. Yes. Okay, Councillor Burnett, thank you. Are there any further questions at this point? Obviously, there'll be an opportunity further to hearing from our speakers to ask questions again. Please. No. Okay. We're going to move to speakers. I'm having problems with my screen's layout here, so I'm going to drop out of the meeting for 30 seconds and come back in. And while I'm doing that, if I could invite Mr. Hannon, please, to take a seat, and I'll come, just give me a moment to get back online.
Perhaps maybe not want to share everything stuff. So
Sorry, yeah, I can do that.
you can always put it back up again if it's needed, just.
Yep.
Sorry about that. Apologies, everybody. It was just distracting to do not have the amendments in front of me. So, Mr. Hanlon, welcome this morning to the applicant. As I explained earlier, you'll have 5 minutes to speak. I'll remind you at approximately when you've got approximately a minute to go, and we'll have the opportunity for questions after. So when you're ready.
Chair, councillors, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm here on behalf of the applicant to support your officer's recommendation to approve this battery energy storage application. As the officer's report clearly sets out, this is a technically robust proposal that complies with both national and local planning policy. It has undergone rigorous consultation and all statutory bodies are content, raising no objection to the application. We carried out community engagement as part of the pre-application process, and the feedback received helped shape the final design, particularly in terms of layout, screening, and minimising local impacts. We're grateful to everyone who engaged with us and contributed to the evolution of the project. This scheme plays an important role in supporting our transition to a low-carbon, secure energy system by storing renewable electricity and strengthening grid stability. The proposed development has been carefully selected and designed to ensure that no significant adverse impacts on the surrounding environment and neighbouring amenities. We will protect local species through the methods laid out in this proposal and within our construction environment management plan. This will ensure protection to nearby habitats and species in the area. A species protection plan has been developed to minimise disturbance to the nearby barn owl nesting box, which has been reviewed and approved by the RSPB. We will also be proposing significant biodiversity enhancement at the site, increasing species-rich grassland, new tree planting, bat boxes, bird boxes, amphibian and reptile hibernation piles, which will expand the nature network for local species. We carried out a flood risk and drainage assessment, which shows the site is at low risk of flooding and is outside steep and designated flood zones. Cover the sign of drainage on the site ensures that the flood risk of the site did not increase, and there is also no significant increase in the risk of flooding elsewhere. This assessment has been accepted by the Council's Flood Risk and Coastal Protection team. While not a material planning consideration, we have submitted an outline fire safety management plan, which covers the systems in place to prevent and respond to the unlikely event of a fire. We will work alongside the Scottish Fire Rescue Service and HSE to ensure that the BES adheres to the highest safety standards. This project will also bring local benefits in line with community well-building principles. We're committed to using local contractors where possible during construction, and we will be providing a community benefit package shaped in collaboration with the local community so that the area sees direct benefit from the host scheme. We will continue to engage with Council to ensure that those local benefits are maximised. Chair, councillors, this is a responsible, well-considered proposal which fully complies with the development plan, as well as national targets for Scotland's transition to net zero. It supports the local economy, protects local amenities, and helps deliver on our shared energy and climate goals. I respectfully ask that you support your officer's recommendation and approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hannon. We'll see if there are questions for you from members. Are there any questions for Mr. Hannon? Please raise your hands if so. So, Councillor Alison.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Particularly in the light of the previous questions to the planning officer and the letter sent in to us from the Community Council, can you explain clearly about the level of need in this particular location and your view on that, please? Can you explain that to us? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your question. Battery is required across the grid nationwide, and we've looked at the different locations where there is requirements for backup to renewable generation. And that's where we did our initial assessments and found it was required in the area where there was going to be increased grid constraints. And that sort of maximised the sort of balancing of the plant and benefits of the renewable generation by having a battery site at this location.
Councillor Addison?
Yes, thank you. That's fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll bring in Councillor Carr, George. If I could ask Mr. Hannon to pop the microphone. Thank you.
Good morning and thanks for your presentation. I was just going to ask, how far are you from, you were saying you were going to connect to the Fiddis substation. Could you just explain how far that is and what that would involve? Thank you.
So we have a great connection with the DNO, the distribution network operator. So we have a grid agreement for connecting at the Fiddis 2 substation, which is approximately just under 2 kilometres away from our site. And that connection will be provided by the DNO. We have, as part of our screen appraisal of the site, we put a grid route appraisal to assess the environmental constraints, which we did look at, and it did indicate that there was no impacts that would warrant an EIA assessment. So we completed that as the screening, and we have looked at what the route would potentially be. However, when it comes to the actual progress of that, it would be with the DNO.
Councillor Carr.
Okay, thanks for that. Second point was, I noticed you had a wildflower area, that you're going to be planting within the site. How would you intend to maintain that as opposed to becoming naturalised?
I mean, I think that falls into that sort of community. We get a local landscape person to come and manage that, and they feed into exactly how that would be managed and looked after to maximise the benefit of the meadow.
Try again.
Microphone.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just as a follow-up to Councillor Carr's question there, I didn't quite catch the distance that the site is from Fiddis substation, if I could get that.
I don't have it in front of me, but I think it is roughly 2 kilometres.
2 kilometres, thank you. So 2 questions as well, other questions. So which wind farms are you expecting to be connected to for actually harvesting the energy that will be stored? And also then the decision around this particular site, you've already mentioned that you did some appraisals of different areas, but can you clarify the reasoning behind the choice of this particular site on this particular field? And if brownfield sites such as the old airfield at Furdon were considered?
When you're ready, Mr. Booth, thank you.
Thank you for that. On the grid aspect, how the buying, selling of electricity is held is to be determined at a later date. It will be very much depending on what is going on to the grid in the local area at the time and getting the contracts in place. So I wouldn't be able to speak to that at this moment. In terms of our site selection, we follow what the different distribution and transmission companies are doing at the time, and look in the area where they are looking for further development to assist the grid. Once we do that, we do an environmental appraisals of feasibility of the area, and this location is one that we saw from early stages that it had minimal environmental impacts and was close to the connection point.
Okay, with that, I'll turn to Councillor Turner. Alan?
Thank you, Chair. It's one respectful technical question. First one, when you say, okay, it's a great connection, said Fiddis, I know it's the megawatt capacity, but I just want to confirm, first of all, is that 400 kV? Is an actual grid as opposed to something that's going direct to filters? Sorry.
No problem. It'll be a 33 kilovolt connection.
Okay, all right, and the second one, I just want to sort of comment, what we've got bits in the report in relation to fire and dealing with fire, etc. I wonder if you can actually just talk through what would be the procedure, etc. in terms of fire. If fire did happen with containers there, batteries, just what would actually, how would you deal with that?
That question is in the context of it not ultimately being a material planning consideration.
Yeah, I'm curious, it's operational, as I said.
It's in the report, there is reference in the report, so I'll bring you these. But for clarity, my understanding is that's not a material planning consideration.
Thank you for that. Yes, we have submitted a fire safety management plan that covers it off in a lot more detail than I will go into at the minute, but we began our sort of safety starts with design. We have spaced our battery units so that they are spaced that in the event that anything did happen, it would be fairly localized to one unit. And then once there's multiple mitigations in place, so in the event all the temperature, humidity, everything in the facility is monitored 24/7. And if there was anything that was determined to be not in the right regulations, then it would be shut down. And there would be also then fire misting systems, extinguishing systems all in place to deal with anything that did it, if there was the instance that anything did occur.
Thank you.
Thank you. At the moment, I'm seeing no further hands. Can I just confirm final opportunity? Okay, so thank you very much, Ms. Khan, for being with us this morning. Please do take a seat and you're welcome to remain and listen to the ongoing proceedings. So with that, I'm now going to invite Mr. Andrew Manson, who I believe is joining us online.
Good morning.
Are you able to put the camera on, Mr. Manson, or are?
Yeah, I rushed home from the airport, so I'm kind of in front of a laptop. So if you can excuse me, I wasn't able to be there today.
No, that's okay. No problem. No problem.
Yeah, sorry for that. I would have attended.
You're here, and can I just confirm you heard what I said at the beginning? I'll be giving you 5 minutes. I'll give you a warning at 4, and thereafter we'll have the opportunity to ask you questions.
That's fine.
Yeah, you've heard that. Okay, so then in which case, when you're ready, Mr. Manson, thank you.
Okay, so, yeah, thanks. So just a quick introduction. Andrew Manson. I live in the old schoolhouse, the old cottage, but I've also built a new house adjacent, and I'll talk about that later. So I live here with my family. We've got a 7-acre site, which we've regenerated. Like I said, I built a new home. We farm the land a bit. We use every inch of the land. So, we use the land all the way along the boundary of this BESS, so it will have a major impact on us, the family, and lifestyle, and also that of our neighbours. So I want to be transparent about what I do for a living. It's important. I'm a chartered engineer. I'm involved in ship technical management, but I own and build and operate cable lay vessels. So I'm currently working on a cable lay conversion, and I'm installing batteries on that cable lay vessel. Exactly the same technology. So I want people to understand I'm not anti-renewables. I'm not anti-BESS. But I understand the benefits of these batteries, and I also understand the risks, and I'll talk about that later. So there's a few fundamental points that I want to get to first. We've talked about them today, but I would like to clarify a few misunderstandings. First of all, let's talk about locational justification, LDP policies R2, RD, and RD1. Following NESO's connection reform process, I sought clarification from NESO about the contracted status of this BESS. The response back from the DNO, which is SSEN, confirmed that this applicant has misled in their application. They have not misled today because they actually quoted the correct substation. They do not have a grid connection for FIDIS GSP. There are 4 BESS sites contracted to connect to that substation, and this is not one of them. They do not have a grid connection. So they have misled in their planning statement, and that is also reiterated by mistake in the Aberdeenshire Committee report. So the primary basis provided for site selection is fundamentally flawed. And I would say that they stood up also at the public consultation and talked about the wrong substation. They have a grid connection for FIDIS 2 GSP. That substation does not exist and may not exist in the words of SSEN. I have forwarded that information to Aberdeenshire Council already. Then we can move on to the need and the requirement for the facility. LDP policy C2. Furthermore, In the planning statement, they argue that this is critical and essential. We've talked about that already today. But according to NESO, there was a question raised earlier. Batteries are significantly oversupplied. There are 3 times more projects than the permitted capacity due to projects which already have protection such as planning. There will be no capacity for batteries at the next window. There are already 4 BESS sites with full planning permission approved for this area, all with DNO agreements to connect to the existing FIDIS GSP. This substation is already at capacity, as informed by SSEN in writing. There is no room for more grid connections for BESS. It's already oversupplied in this area. So we've got NESO confirming we've got 3 times more. The local grid is oversupplied. We cannot describe this as critical or essential. We cannot. Then I would like to get on to site boundary irregularities. This is an application for a major development. There was a notification for change of the site boundary, enlarging it. That was not legally competent. Then we have another application, the one we discussed earlier, 2027-67, seeking to extend the boundary of the initial application, realizing that their earlier attempts were legally incompetent. Now we have 2 drawings, site boundaries with the bell mouth not matching. We also have 5 other drawings with discrepancies on the entire site boundaries. So which one is it? So by effectively dividing the proposal into 2 components, one which is a major development and one which is a local development, the applicants have denied the opportunity for third parties to engage this development as a whole. They are frustrating the entire intent of a pre-application regime. This application should have restarted in its entirety. Then we talk about fire risk. That's why I wanted to tell you what I do for a living. I have not Googled something about fires. That's fine. I have not Googled something about fires. I have firsthand seen what can happen with BESS fires. The applicant has said that in their firefighting regime, they will pump water for 2 hours. This will not put a fire out. The fire brigade will have to quench it for 2 to 3 days. The attenuation pond sits in a flood zone. Look at the SEPA maps. It is in a flood zone. It will overflow and it will pour into the local watercourse. Site flooding, the site is in a flood zone. The roads are narrow as 2.9 metres. Wildlife, we talked about Barnold. The Barnold Trust has condemned this application. RSPB may not have. We can talk about trees. Even though you've moved the cable route, you're cutting through the root protection zone on ancient trees. So, you know, you may consider me a NIMBY. What I'm saying is I consider that this should not go in anyone's backyard, never mind my own. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Manson. Okay, I'm going to bring in the area manager before I leave questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just remind members that the planning process involves planning officers taking expert and unbiased testimony from people involved in the planning process, and that's reported to you in the report, has been, introduced to you by Louise and Howard. Obviously, members of the public who have objected are very welcome to come in and give their personal perspective, but can I remind members they should not be seen as expert witnesses. They should be seen as people that are purely coming in from their perspective. Very welcome to do so, but you should not be asking questions based on the assumption that is some of the things you've heard are coming from an expert and unbiased witness. Thank you.
Can I invite questions, please, for Mr. Manson? Do you want to come? Any questions for Mr. Manson? I'm seeing no hands at the moment. Councillor Carr, Jordan.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Mr. Manson, for your presentation. One of our policies is residential amenity. Could you maybe outline what your concerns are relating to the amenity of your property were this application to be granted? Thank you.
Yes, what I would say is the landscape impact and the noise impact assessments completely ignore my dwelling house. They completely ignore the new dwelling house, which I'll be moving into in a couple of weeks. It's not in the assessment. When you ask the question, how far away is the nearing dwelling house, everyone was talking about the wrong house. I have a house that is 50 metres closer to the best than what's in any of the assessment reports. This was raised to the planning department, but the documentation design statements didn't resolve it. There is no screening, bonding or planting on the entirety of my boundary. In fact, some of the documentation submitted showed that I should plant on my side of the boundary to mitigate the impact. That's not acceptable. There is no bunding at all or planting on the side of the property that adjoins to my house. And my house is significantly closer than in any of the reports. So of course this will impact us. We will see this and we will hear this every single day.
Any further follow-up, Councillor Carroll?
No, I think that's fine. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, so let me just check again. Are there any questions for Mr. Manson? I'm seeing no hands, Mr. Manson, so thank you very much for your presentation this morning. Again, you're very welcome to stay in the meeting and hear the further proceedings, but there will be a further opportunity to take part. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll come now to our final speaker, which is Mr. David Mearns. I invite you to take a seat. You'll be up to speed now with how things are working.
Yeah.
So I'll just reset my timer for your 5 minutes, and when you're ready, please do begin. Thank you.
The concern with the site, it's its location, and we own the farm next to it, and no one's approached us to come through our ground or anything like that for a grid connection. And the ponds are not big enough to quench that. If that thing's go up in fire, the pond is not big enough because a fire engine pumps about 1,500 gallons per minute. And that pond won't keep it going for days. And the brownfield sites round about, i.e. Buckbuck Quarry, and there's a grid connection comes from there, from St John's Wind Farm at Kenneth to this, and it's only 30 feet from the quarry. Don't understand why they're using good agricultural ground to be wasted when there's so many other battery storages within our area. How many battery storages does the local community need? That's
your
what I'd say.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ewan. I will ask whether or not there are any questions for Mr. Ewan regarding this presentation. Councillor Carr, George.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Mr. Ewan, for coming along today. With your land, you would, we're told this would connect, by an underground cable, of some description. So that would definitely impact on your opinion, for this to be granted. And what would be the impacts, in your opinion, should that take those plans?
Well, once you disturb farm ground, it takes years and years to get it back to working condition. And as a small farm, well, we can't really afford it. I have years and years of trying to get ground back into working condition.
Any further follow-up, Councillor Carr?
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Right, so on just teasing that out a wee bit, I mean, I'm well aware of where your farm is. I'm well aware of the soil type, and some soils will recover quicker than others. What's your view about the soil type you have? Up in your area and Lower Bruxy Hill, in terms of recovery, do you think it would take a long time, or do you think it would recover quickly? Thanks.
Can I just check, because obviously you're talking about lands not within the development site. So can I bring in Maureen, please, just to clarify? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Parton, I was trying to highlight to the Chair, I think what you're talking about is the connection would be the works required to connect. That's not part of this, what you're considering today. I appreciate where you're coming from, but that's not something that we're considering today.
Okay. Thank you very much. So that question's not relevant for you, I'm afraid. We're just taking questions, I'm afraid.
Oh,
is that question?
Sorry, put something in. How long it take them? How often is these batteries be replaced?
you'd like to repeat that, if you've got your, I'll let you bring your point in, as you still had a lot of your 5 minutes left.
As we all know, walkways don't last forever. So how often does this have to be ripped out and put back in again? And it's 40-year lifetime.
I think that's a further point you're making there. So can I just, ask, are there any further questions for Mr. Ewan? Seeing no hands, so in which case, thank you to you for being with us this morning, Mr. Ewan. If you'd like to take a seat, you're welcome to stay in the meeting and watch our further deliberations. So I'll turn now to Louise just to ask whether or not there are any comments that you wish to make off the back of contributions from our speakers, and then we'll take further questions to you from members as may be required.
Yeah, I suppose just to reiterate, a lot of the points were technical elements which are out with our remit or regarding the grid connection, which I hope I've kind of clarified already. The other point was the supply, etc., and amenity impact. If that's to just clarify, it was brought up by the neighbour that the new house wasn't included within the noise impact assessment, and it might not be one of the properties because it's not being completed in construction, but we can see the noise impact from. I could actually share a screen if that is helpful, guys. And that basically just want to clarify that although yeah, so we can see there, this is what this is the noise impact assessment which environmental health have already reviewed. And you can see there that our numbers, R1, R2, R3, R4, etc. And R2 is the old schoolhouse. The property that has been built is just directly beside the old schoolhouse to the north, so yes, closer to the proposed base station, but you can see that all of the property will still remain within the acceptable noise limit, which has been assessed by environmental health. So I did want to clarify that point.
Thank you. Mr. Manson, I see your hand, but you cannot contribute further to proceedings. I'm sorry, I understand that would be frustrating for you, but I'm not going to be able to take any comment or question from you. Thank you.
Okay, understood.
Thank you. I appreciate your understanding. Thank you very much. With any further comments? So no. Yeah, okay. So I'll open it up to colleagues. If we could just remember at this point, we are still dealing with questions. If I could ask Councillor Carney, please. Councillor Carney and Councillor Hughes, we could have please. So does anybody have any further questions for the planner? Thank you. Councillor Turner, Alan.
I'd like to comment, if possible, on the grid connection that was said by one of the speakers there. Talked about Phyllis, talked about second Phyllis that was proposed. I wonder, can you comment on it more on that in relation to some of the things that was said by that particular speaker?
In regard to the grid connection itself, there's probably not much more I can say other than the fact that it's very clear in policy that we cannot consider it. It's an aspect separate to the planning process that will require negotiation and agreement. And ultimately, if that can't be made and they cannot get agreement, the development won't go ahead. Regarding proximity, I think that was one of the questions regarding like the proper. There's a number of best proposals all within a relatively close proximity to the substation. This one is 1.8 kilometres from the substation. The one that is to the west of Bruxy Hill, which was approved within the last 2 years, was 2.6 kilometres. So this is actually closer to the grid than one of the most recent approvals. And then we've also got the best to the north, and that's approximately 3.8 kilometres from the substation, and that was to be the Vetteresto one. So the grid connection distance, we're within the range that we've considered acceptable previously.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sullivan, Mel?
Apologies. I was curious about what the first objector said about there's no screening between his new house and the development. Could you comment on that, please?
The screening is post screening is what I did identify, which is the bund which runs. It does run along the west side, then the north, and then there's the meadow, and then the development abuts the ancient woodland. There is a gap where the access will be, but generally speaking, you've also got the woodland that runs from the site down to the neighbours. So I would think that there may be some visibility, but it's very limited because that is got foliage within it. So we have assessed it, and there is a separation distance as well of we're talking 200 metres. So with all that taken into account, we are quite content that we are accepting there's going to be a localised visual impact, but it's not to an unacceptable level.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll turn to Catherine. Councillor Victor, Catherine?
Yeah, just a quick question, Barney. Are you quite satisfied that there are no brownfield sites that could accommodate this battery?
Whether there's brownfield sites or not isn't something we can look at. There's not a hierarchy of development for energy infrastructure. We can't look at it and go, it's not like a house where you're looking at brownfield infrastructure. You do look at a hierarchy of, okay, a farmer wants to put a property for this essential worker. We would look for them to reuse brownfield opportunities first and foremost because policy requires that. Energy infrastructure, there's not a hierarchy that development requires in that regard. All energy development would be acceptable in principle, subject to the criteria we've talked about. So we don't need them to have looked at brownfield sites to be acceptable.
Okay. I'm just going to add on that sort too. It's a bit like what I was saying to Councillor Carr. We have to assess the application that is in front of us as it's presented. And this has been reinforced just now by Louise with respect to there not being a hierarchy that we need to consider. I just have one quick question, and that would be to ask you to speak to, and maybe it's actually for Morag, sure, to the issue of competence of the two applications rather than one single application before us this morning. Thank you.
Yeah, no, we are content that it has gone. There's been a bit of to and fro, but that doesn't make the application not competent. There's different ways you can deal with it. We could have withdrawn the whole thing and put in a new application with the access. However, that wasn't considered necessary. Initially, the application was just re-advertised with the red line change for the access, and then we decided that it was clearer and more appropriate to submit a separate application, because that's generally what we can do. And it's not unusual for us to have two applications. For example, you might have a housing development where we realise the drainage infrastructure actually needs to be in the field beside it. We would have a separate second application which links the two together. So they have been assessed together, they have gone through the motions, and actually arguably there's been more opportunity for public comment because we've had the pack and clone process, we've had the initial BESS application, we've then had re-advertisement within the BESS application, and then a separate access application. All of these have been opportunities for comment.
Thank you very much. Councillor Carr, George.
Chair, I'll be proposing to put my motion to no questions.
Well, okay. Thank you. Councillor Fanny, do you have a question? No. Okay, you're also ready to move on. Okay, can I just double check then? Are there any further questions for Louise?
Yeah.
Yes, Councillor.
I'm going to speak this computer one.
That's okay, no, that's fine.
Yeah. I believe that it's the battery storage I'm slightly worried about. They can go on fire, and in doing so that they give you some noxious fumes. But is the health safety, included in this, as it is with gas pipelines? I just wonder that.
Yes, so it's not a material planning consideration because it is regulated by other bodies like the Scottish Fire Rescue Service, Health and Safety Executive, SEPA. So that's why it's not material. It's because it's within the remit of other bodies.
So there's not a report from the health and safety then?
There's a report for this application, do you mean? So no, there's not, as part of this application, there's not a report from them, but they will need to negotiate and discuss it. There has been a fire safety management plan submitted with this application and other associated documents just to give comfort, but it's not, that we've not consulted the health and safety executive as part of this because it's not material, it is dealt with separately.
Thank you. So can I again confirm that there are no further questions for Louise with respect to the applications? And I would just say before we do move on in a moment, we're going to look at these, we'll ultimately take a decision on the two separate, considering this as a package, but when it comes to it, we'll look at the first application and then we'll look at the second application when it comes to just confirming what any decisions are with respect to them. So can I ask, do we feel we have enough information to proceed to deliberation? Oh, Councillor Black, is that an answer to that question?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I don't know that we do have enough information. There's questions over the community benefits that needs to be conditioned. There's questions over the location and the connections. And I think that, you know, some of that information should be fleshed out. And I would suggest that potentially we need a site visit, and I would seek a seconder.
I'll second that.
I'm going to bring Morag in because our reasons do need to be clear before a site visit. So Morag, bring you in. Oh, I beg your pardon. Apologies.
Thank you, Councillor Black. There were a handful of things within that sort of preamble to asking for a site visit. And are you looking for specific information on the other matters? So you had community benefits, location? Yeah,
I would. I mean, I would like a site visit so we can actually understand the lay of the land in the location, but also more information on when we're asking, do we have enough information? I don't feel that we do have enough information on the community and economic benefits according to our charter and strategy, and the connections and clarity over where it is going to be connected to. What permission they have, whether it's FIDIS 1, FIDIS 2, etc., because that is not clear within the reporting that we have in front of us at the moment.
Okay, can I just clarify, and I'm quite happy to bring Louise in if need be, the connection is not a material consideration, so that's not something that it's going to be possible to bring more information on because it's not material to the decision that you will be making on these applications. I can bring Louise in on the community benefits because I'd just like her to clarify as far as material consideration goes with material benefits.
Yeah.
That still leaves you with a site visit for a good reason that you want to understand the layout of the land and the landscaping, etc. That's perfectly acceptable.
Yeah, because the other consideration, which would be material, is cumulative impact on the local amenity, because we already have 3 or 4 consented in the area.
So that's fine. I'm just going to bring Louise in briefly on community benefit, but I'm happy that there are sufficient reasons there for a motion for a site visit.
Yeah, there is a community benefit document within the submission which outlines what they're proposing, and I think I did touch on it earlier that we are satisfied that it meets the objectives of the charter. Like, there's been a commitment made for, you know, to support the local economy, to create supply chain opportunities, now and at decommissioning places. So either way, we have had it assessed and reviewed by the planning and economy team, and they are content with it. The condition is just to reiterate points that we would to get detail on the ongoing operation of it during the course of its lifetime. So that is attached to the consent, or it would be if it was approved. So yeah, it's. I'm not sure what other clarification we can really give on that.
Can I just come? So Councillor Black, do you accept that assurance?
Not entirely, I'm afraid. Although the planners may be assured, doesn't necessarily mean that us as councillors around the table are assured.
Thank you. So can I, no, well, so obviously we have a seconded motion for a site visit.
Yes.
I'm assuming if we have a site visit, this will then come back to committee afterwards. And my question would be whether or not there could be further information related to community development and private appointment.
So, Chair, I think the first thing I want to confirm is whether or not any other member wishes to move an amendment to go against or to say that you don't want to site visit. But on your second question, I mean, it's certainly something the planners could take away, because if we stop today for the site visit, the whole application is deferred until the next committee, until after that site visit has taken place. So it would be a matter for the planners as to whether or not there is something further they can bring back. I think from what Louise is saying, it may not be the case, but it's certainly something that could be taken away.
Thank you for the answer to that question. So can I ask, is there anybody who would wish to suggest an amendment that we do not have a site visit? Councillor Carr, is that hand just legacy because you were going to put a motion earlier?
Thanks, Chair. I think in this instance, we had a situation before where a member said they didn't have enough information, and I think I would not want to proceed because I think we were advised before that a member does not feel we've got enough information. We should not be determining an application at this point in time. So I would pull back on this basis and agree with Councillor Black that you know, two members have said that they would prepare a site visit. So I would not be comfortable to move any amendment to that. Thanks.
Yes, I'm going to move briefly.
Thank you, because that makes me very happy, Councillor Carr, because I think in an ideal world, in a polite collaborative committee, that is a good stance to take. However, technically, if any member was minded to move a motion, then that would be competent. It would then just be a matter for the members that wish to site visit to consider their position. So, well, appreciate your stance.
Okay, at the moment, I'm not seeing any hands for the moving of an amendment. So on that basis, we are moving for a site visit, which brings our deliberations this morning on these two applications to a conclusion. And it will sit with the committee officer and the planners to work out timing for that, bearing in mind we're going into the recess and how that will be taken forward. But I'll bring you in again, Laura, if you have something further to say.
Yes, so matters not effectively brought to conclusion, but you're defending consideration of these applications pending the site visit. Yes.
So with that correct language for this minute, I'll bring this item therefore to a close. Thank you to everybody for their contributions on that, and thank you to our speakers today for attending and for their ongoing patience as we consider this down the line with the referrals. So I'm going to suggest a 15-minute break. That's okay, or let's say we come back at 11:10. We'll have a comfort break until 11:10. Thank you all very much.